At every single stage of our lives, when we're just starting out, when we finally make it, and even when we fail, there's this hidden enemy working against us. It's the one opponent that's responsible for derailing more dreams and destroying more careers than pretty much anything else. And its name? It's ego.
This quote from the incredible artist Marina Abramovich, it just cuts right to the heart of it all. See, we so often confuse ego with confidence or, healthy self-esteem. But as we're about to see, ego is a totally different beast. It's a poison. It's that destructive belief that we're better than we actually are, that we're somehow entitled to more than we've earned.
So what are we really talking about here? Well, for our purposes, let's define ego as an unhealthy belief in our own importance. It's that little voice inside your head that whispers, "You're special," or "The rules don't apply to you." And yeah, it feels good in the moment. It's a great way to soothe our insecurities, but it is a short-term fix with absolutely devastating long-term consequences. It blocks our ability to learn, to adapt, and to really connect with other people. Okay, so let's look at how this enemy attacks us at 3 critical stages of any journey. We're going to start at the very beginning with the aspiring mind. This is when we're full of ambition, we're just starting out on our path, and it's right here that ego lays its most deceptive traps. Our culture is obsessed with passion, right? But here's the thing. Passion can be blind, it can be selfish, and it's often driven by the ego's constant need for attention. It's that unbridled enthusiasm that can so easily lead to burnout and some really bad decisions. Purpose, on the other hand, is sober. It's directed. Just think about someone like Eleanor Roosevelt, who actually disliked being called passionate. She was driven by purpose. It was this reasoned, deliberate drive to get something specific done, completely detached from her ego's need for applause. So what's the antidote to ego in this early stage? It's all about having a student mindset. Take Kirk Hammett from Metallica. Get this. When he lands his dream job as the new guitarist for one of the biggest bands in the world, what's the first thing he does? Does he think, "I've made it"? Nope. He immediately finds a teacher, the legendary Joe Satriani, and starts taking lessons. He knew that even with his new status, he was still a student of his craft. He focused on the effort, not the praise. And that's what made him a legend. And that brings us to one of the biggest ego traps for the aspiring mind today, the danger of just talking. Social media makes it so easy to announce our goals, to puff out our chests and get all this validation for saying we're going to do something. But the ego mistakes all that chatter for actual achievement. It gets its reward right up front, and the motivation to do the hard, quiet work, it just disappears. But look, if ego is a problem when we're starting out, it can become an absolute monster after we succeed. And here's the paradox. The very success we work so hard for actually makes us more vulnerable to our own worst enemy. We start to believe our own hype. Just look at the tragic story of Howard Hughes. In the 1920s, he's a brilliant inventor, a movie mogul. By the 40s, a visionary in aviation. But his ego, just completely inflated by all his triumphs, convinced him that he was the center of the universe. And this led him down a dark path, into paranoia, into isolation, and ultimately to a lonely, tragic end. He was a man literally working furiously with one hand to build his empire and with the other to completely tear it all down. Hughes suffered from the 3 sicknesses that ego breeds after success. First, entitlement. That belief that your work is so important the world has to bend to your will. Second, control. The obsessive need for everything to be done your way, which just paralyzes your team and burns out everyone around you. And finally, paranoia, that creeping suspicion that everyone is out to get you, which isolates you completely. Now, for a complete contrast, think about General George Marshall. This guy was arguably one of the most powerful men of his time, the architect of victory in World War II. But unlike Hughes, he was defined by his humility. He actively told people not to promote him and focused entirely on the mission. As President Truman put it, the man never thought about himself. He was driven by service, not by status. The famous basketball coach, Pat Riley, actually gave this whole phenomenon a name, the disease of me. It's what happens after a team wins a championship. That innocent climb, where everyone is working together, it gets replaced by ego. Suddenly, players start thinking about their own stats, their own credit. We becomes me. And that's exactly when champions fall apart, when success just fractures from the inside out. Which brings us to our final stage, failure. And let's be real, it's inevitable. We will all face setbacks, we'll all face adversity, and moments where things just completely fall apart. And it's right here, in this moment,
that ego can take a bad situation and make it infinitely, catastrophically worse.
Think about it. When we fail, what's ego's number one priority? To protect itself. It totally rejects reality. It refuses to accept that we might be the problem. So what does it do? It blames others, it makes excuses, and it prevents us from learning the very lessons we desperately need to grow. It convinces us that the only way out is to double down, to escalate, instead of to just soberly accept what's happened and adapt.
This chart really shows the two paths we can take. When John DeLorean's famous car company was failing, mostly because of his own bad decisions, his ego just could not handle it. So what did he do? He tried to finance the company with a massive cocaine deal. I mean, really, it led to his public ruin. Now contrast that with Katharine Graham. When she took over the Washington Post, she faced enormous financial pressure, strikes, but she didn't blame anyone. She owned the problem, she learned from it, and she developed the kind of fortitude that made her one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century.
So, this all brings us to the very core of it. This battle against ego, it isn't about one stage of life or some quick fix. It is a constant, lifelong choice between two fundamentally different ways of living.
Let me tell you about Colonel John Boyd. He was one of the most brilliant military strategists in American history. He completely revolutionized aerial combat and military theory. But most of us have never even heard of him. And why is that? Because he repeatedly sacrificed promotions, pay, prestige, all the things the ego just craves, so that he could have the freedom to do the work that actually mattered. He chose impact over image every single time. And this was the question Boyd would pose to a young pilot he was mentoring. To be somebody or to do something. It's a choice between chasing status, titles, recognition, that's the to be somebody part, or focusing on the actual work, the contribution, the mission, that's the to do something part. One is all about appearance, the other is about accomplishment. And as Boyd would explain, this isn't a one-time decision you make. In life, there is a constant roll call. The choice presents itself again and again and again, in moments big and small. And every single time, you have to decide.
And ultimately, that's the big takeaway. At every turn, whether you're just starting out, you're enjoying success, or you're picking yourself up from failure, ego is right there, whispering in your ear, tempting you to choose yourself over the work, to be somebody or to do something. It really might be the most important question you ever answer. So, which will you choose?